morning, everyone. Good morning, and welcome back. Welcome back to another PorscheCooled Podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things Porsche. My name is Michael Barth. We have another owner's stories today. If you're not familiar with the podcast, the PorscheCooled Podcast is on every Tuesdays and Fridays. On Fridays, it's me and Steve, my mate from Sydney, Australia, talking about Porsches. I'm based in Bahrain. I'm currently in London. I'm recording this in London today. It's a Saturday morning. What I'm trying to do at the moment is get you guys... I'm recording these owner stories a little bit in advance than what I normally do, just so we have enough over the Christmas period and in January. The next couple of weeks, obviously, are going to get busy for everyone, me included. But I just didn't want to stop the owner stories because I know you guys are really enjoying it and really connecting with the people on the owner's stories. I know a lot of you have even started talking to other people on the owner's stories, which is great, following their Instagrams, following their YouTubes. And that's what it's all about. It's just about sharing the passion that we all have. So today I have I have another good one coming up for you guys. And it's going to be a good one as well because it's something different, something that we haven't had on the podcast before, which is a classic. I'm just going to say it's a classic Porsche. It's an air-cooled Porsche. And I'm going to I've got Marc coming up very shortly. I'm going to connect with him on Zoom in a few minutes. Marc is from Western Australia in Australia, of course, from Perth. And Marc is... He's heavily involved in Porsche. He's heavily involved in sharing his passion for Porsche. I'm going to let Marc tell you all about it. So let's just get the Zoom going and start chatting with Marc about Porsche. So this is PorscheCooled Owner Stories. It's Owner Stories 12, and that's it. So let's get into it. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to the PorscheCooled Podcast. Like I said, this is Owner Stories again today, and we have a good one. We have Marc with us on Zoom, and Marc is from Perth, all the way in sunny Australia. How are you, Marc?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on today.
No, it's great. Marc actually reached out to me, I think about a week ago, wasn't it? About a week ago, showing me his car, and he's also got a YouTube channel and his YouTube channel. And I was interested to have you on because I haven't had anyone on, and people will know what we're going to talk about because it's in the title, but I haven't had anyone on that's had a 356, and I'm pretty keen on the classics because I'm doing my search for the powerful 912 that people tell me to keep away from.
Well, it's something I definitely know something about because it does share a very common drivetrain platform with the car I own.
Yeah, true. So let's get into that shortly.
Sure.
But just for the listeners, I always like to start this PorscheCooled Podcast owner stories with the background and you know. It's about everyone's story. It's about how everyone has a different story to tell. That's what this episode is all about. Let's just get straight into it. And what are your first memories of Porsche, of noticing Porsche or, you know, wanting a Porsche? Was it when you were a kid or did it happen later in life?
Sure. Look, this is... Probably I'm a notorious talker, so this whole podcast is going to go longer than you hoped at 1 hour, okay. I'm sure, that's right? Okay. But I'll paint the picture for you. I grew up in Geelong, Victoria, which for viewers or listeners outside of Australia is sort of like the automotive manufacturing hub of Australia. And both my parents worked for Ford Motor Company. My father actually worked for the section called Product Engineering, which developed all the GT products, which would mean something to Australian people with the touring cars and all that sort of thing. Anyway, he worked on weekends, fixing cars, that sort of thing. And we had a lot of Aussie muscle cars coming through our garage on the weekends. So, you know, GT Falcons, Holden Monaros, all that sort of stuff. You know, again, what the Aussie listeners will be very familiar with. And one day, what was very likely the only 356 to exist in Geelong, I'm guessing at the time, was a silver 356 turned up because it was backfiring, and I know why now, but obviously as an adult and an owner of the car, right, well, it wouldn't have caused a problem. But back then I was like 9 years old, so without giving too much away, it would have been in the late 70s, early 80s. And this car turns up, and in all honesty, it looked like a spaceship. The thing was tiny compared to the Aussie cars, and it was all smooth and aerodynamic. Well, what I now know to be aerodynamic, but didn't back then, because my only exposure to cars really was, again, these big Aussie muscle cars, which were styled on American cars. And so we got in the car and we took it around the block, and I just couldn't believe he wasn't going to slow down to go around a corner. Again, This is, Aussie cars are made to go in straight lines.
Yeah, true, true.
Yeah, so and it was just such an eye-opening experience. And look, knowing 356 as I do today, I now understand why I could see the road pass underneath my feet because of the rust in the floors, right? But overall, the experience was just like revolutionary almost for me. I didn't even understand that cars existed like this.
So that was
and
it.
The noise it made, and it was just like an epiphany moment, really. And look, and I guess it really went away for a little bit. I sort of forgot about the car a bit. And then when we were about 12 or 13, I was about 12 or 13 years old, we did the great Victorian dream, went to Queensland for the holiday, you know what I mean? And on the way up, we pulled in, to look back, it was probably somewhere on the New South Wales Central Coast,
right.
A service station, and in pulled a 356.
Wow, that's a rare sight on the Central Coast.
Yeah, it would have been. And again, this is back in the 80s,
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this thing going, this is unbelievable. This is exactly like that other car. And as soon as I went up to the car, because the old man was filling up the XD Falcon full of fuel because it needed a lot of it.
Yeah.
And this 356 was getting fueled up, and I walked up to it, and just the smell, the whole oil getting cooked on the exhaust because it had a leak, and the moisture because it would have had a water leak at somewhere inside the car for the carpet smelling mildewy. Yep. All that sort of thing come back to me. I thought, my goodness, I forgot all about this. I've got to have one. And look, in all honesty, it took me a long time, and I did own another Porsche before I got my 356, but that was really the moment that really set it in stone. I was a little bit older, and it sort of stuck with me,
All right, so you were around 14 or 13 when you last saw one, when you have that memory. Mm-hmm. So then how long did it take you to buy your first Porsche? What was the first one you had then? Because I didn't realize you had one before.
Yeah, sure. I had a 914 because I'm a big fan of the four-cylinder Porsches. And I bought that, I think, in 1991. And it was a American import. I actually looked at it, bought it for all of my savings of about $2,300 at the time.
Yep.
And the guy.
This is when they were affordable.
In all reality, it was probably worthless to look back on, and but it was black and it had like a mini light replica wheels on it. It was a pretty good car to look back on. Like I actually drove it from Perth to Sydney and back again.
Okay.
During my ownership of it.
Yep.
And but when I went and looked at the car, much to my horror, knowing what I know now, the guy says to me, look, how much money did you bring? This is in California where I bought the car from,
right.
And imported it to Australia. The guy says to me, how much money did you bring? I said, look, I bought the money for the car, thinking he's going to try and negotiate higher because I'd got on a plane and travelled all the way to the USA to buy this car. And I said, why is that? He says, I've got another car at the back, that I want about $22,000 for. I said, okay, let's go and have a look at it anyway. And there was a 904 GTS Carrera there that he wanted for $22,000, so.
Wow.
And to look back on now, that's the great car regret that I've ever had,
Yeah, I can't even imagine how much they are now, but that would have been the buy of the century.
Yeah, and look, you know what? I probably would have sold it for 40 and felt like a millionaire.
Yeah. So you flew to the US to get this 914.
Yeah, and look, back then I think the return flight was about $900. So in the scheme of it all, it was, it's all relative to today, of course,
Yeah. So you had the 914. How long did you own that for, Marc?
I actually owned that for probably up until about I would have been about 2001, 2002. It sat on blocks for a while because I actually dropped a core plug doing about 80 mile an hour somewhere in the country, and the motor seized within about 4 seconds, like a good air-cooled car does when it drops all its oil out. And I thought I'll fix that one day and never got around to it. And a wrecker actually bought it off me for about $6,000, which is a lot more money than it owed me. So I walked away from it. And
so looking back on it, was it a good decision for a first Porsche or not?
Look, the chassis, knowing 914s as I do, and look, I'm certainly no expert in the brand, but I am very familiar with four-cylinder Porsches. And I would say that Type 4 motor was a lot more capable than being developed than the one I had. It was a fuel injected one. It was a pretty good car, but it was underpowered for the chassis, and overall the driving dynamic was fantastic. But I think I would have preferred a more powerful car at that time. At that time of my life as well. We're talking about a time when I'm in my early 20s here. So in the scheme of things,
So you bought it in the 90s, was it? Around the 90s?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So the choices at the time when you're thinking, okay, I want my first Porsche. Mm-hmm. You definitely wanted a 914, or did it come down?
I did not want to buy a 911. Right.
You didn't want to buy a 911.
I didn't know, but look. I'm not sure how well this thing's going to be edited that you're going to post, but I just the stigma that went with 911 drivers back in the early 90s was dentist/wanker.
Yep.
Okay, it's a whole different. It's it was a car that was bought for its badge as opposed to for the passion for the product, which it reflects a bit more now.
Yeah, you're right. The general feel, and maybe our listeners, because we have a lot of listeners from the US and UK. I mean, in Australia, it was kind of more like that. I don't know whether it was like that in the US and the UK so much. Maybe it was. It's like the stigma attached to BMW drivers. It's that sort of thing. Porsche's kind of lost it a bit though, with the increase in people wanting air cools and the passion behind the brand. It has actually changed. It's not like that now. You would agree, Marc? It's not the same now.
I would say that there's more appreciation for the product being developed for the enthusiast as opposed to the badge.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah. And whereas back then, it's just perception in the market at the time. And also the 911 was a lot further out of my budget than what the 914 was at that time of my life. And look, in saying that, I don't own a 911 today, and
yep.
I do, in all reality, I will very likely buy one in the future, but I just don't, back then that wasn't something that was really on my radar. And, it's just one of those, back then it was one of those cars, and a little bit like Ferraris / Lambos are today, in that you can't just pull up out the front of a cafe and get out of it without saying, oh, look at that tool.
Yeah.
Do you sort of get what I mean when I say that?
Yeah, no, I understand. And it's, it's like Ferraris today. I mean, you get a lot of attention. I was speaking to the owner stories that's coming up next Tuesday. The guy from New Zealand I was talking to, Paul, he has a Ferrari as well, but he has two Porsches. So it's a different way. I mean, I know Steve's uncle had a Ferrari and he sold it and he's just bought a 991.2 911 because it is the attention you get in the Ferrari. And I think that's why people are drawn to Porsches, because people feel like they don't get as much attention in a Porsche.
Sure.
You get the attention from people that really know about the car and know about the design and know about it and want to talk to you. But it feels like there's more appreciation on the Porsche side than there is, say, on Ferrari or Lambos. So this is 1990-ish, 1990-ish.
Yeah, about 91, I think it would have been to look back on, yeah.
So you have the 914. Mm-hmm. So then you have a big break before you get your next Porsche?
It was a big break. I bought the 356 in about 2012, late 2012, early 2013. So
so the cars you owned during that period were sports cars or just average sort of cars?
Cars necessary for work. To give you an idea, I had like a a Holden SS Ute. I had a Ford Ute. I had a Volkswagen transporter van. These sorts of things,
practical cars,
vehicles that were necessary to do my day-to-day work.
Yep. So you've had the 914. The passion for Porsche doesn't go away. You've still got that passion. It's still there. And then you're thinking, okay, so it gets to a point where you recall that memory from a kid, that 356 in that you had a drive in, the 356 at the petrol station on the Central Coast. When do you seriously start thinking, okay, I'm going to start looking for a 356?
Look, I think, to look back on it now, I would say it's really the evolution of what we know today as the ease of the internet. because you're getting so much information thrown at you. Like you were talking about
true.
the era of like late 90s, early 2000s, where we could, go on and look at things like bring a trailer. We could look at things like car sales. Look, before that, you're going out and you're buying the local newspaper, or you're going and getting the what was it called back then? The Trading Post.
True.
Or the Sunday Times, or whatever newspaper or print media product there was before. And even then it was just a 3-line ad, which you'd make a phone call about, you go and see. But with the evolution of the internet, it sort of brought so much to us, and I've got to tell you right now, I'm listening to myself sounding like I'm 100 years old. Okay, so it's
no.
But
I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, but that's really what it was. And it opened up so much knowledge, and I can look at a picture and go, no, yes, investigate further, click, that sort of thing. Whereas up to then, we never really had that. And, as a generation, and, I know you're probably not too dissimilar in age from me, where you've been through that period where we didn't have the options, or we bought a magazine called Unique Cars in Australia, which you go through and finally there's a Porsche, or finally there's another Porsche, after looking through all the American muscle cars. So getting that
and now
visibility,
sorry, go on.
Yeah, that really whet my appetite by getting that visibility through the internet, that I could then go and get stuck into it and yes, no, by clicking and dragging and doing all those sorts of things, which I'm very grateful for too, I've got to tell you.
Yeah, well, the thing about the internet is that you actually learn along the way, don't you? You learn about these cars. I mean, I'm not a 912 expert, and, I want to get a 912, and I've learnt from them by just doing searches and looking at the ads and speaking to other 912 owners, a couple of people in the UK who I've been chatting to, just to get that information that you need. But you're right, it's much easier now.
And I think that really, that amplified my motivation to, if I don't do this soon, I won't ever be able to do it. And sort of the bubble was getting big quickly with 356s back in the, late 2010s, early 2010s, if you know what I mean. So I had to, I spent probably from about 2007 onwards regularly looking, seeing what cars are available globally, because I was quite specific in what I actually wanted, Yeah,
I remember, and this is probably in early mid-2000s, I think it was, 2006, 2005, there was a guy from Bondi in Sydney who's actually a restaurateur in Sydney, who's quite a well-known one, who has a very cool restaurant in Bondi, who I know. And he got a 356 convertible. And I remember at the time it was, and I never went for a drive in it, but I remember it wasn't an expensive car. It really wasn't an expensive car. This is probably around 2003, actually.
Sure.
And he used to drive it around, beat up, and it was the coolest looking car. But it was still, even then, in that year, it was still very underrated, wasn't it? It didn't really, people weren't really looking at 356s as much. Obviously now, like you said, it's changed. I always look at a site in the US called European Collectibles in California.
I know the guys.
Yeah, and the 356s they have that come up there, I mean, I look for the 912s, but the 356s they have coming up there, you can't get a 356C for under, 120,000 US.
Yeah, and look,
if you're lucky.
And for international listeners to this podcast, to give you some perspective, we have this alarmingly painful thing called luxury car tax in Australia. So as a guide to import a car from the US, the actual landed cost in Australia loosely is around double whatever the US price is. So
true.
Yeah, so that what Michael's talking about there is like nearly $250,000 Australian dollars to get that car on the road to drive as a regular hobby car or daily driver. So, that's a lot of money to a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, any car that's over, I think it's 66,000, so the listeners know, anything over 66,000, if you bring it in from the US, you get GST, you don't get duty on cars over 30 years old, but you get luxury car tax, like Marc said. So it really does add to the cost of your car. So a car that's 120,000 US is probably going to cost you close to 200,000 US. 200,000, probably, no, 120,000, what's that? It's going to cost, like Marc said, it's going to cost you substantially more. So you have to bear this in mind. So, the pick is, like, I know when I'm looking for 912s, I'm always looking at ones that hit below the luxury car tax, so I don't have to pay that extra bit if I bring it in. I think we've jumped forward. Tell the listeners, Marc, about your car, because we haven't actually introduced it properly.
That's
Everyone
a great
knows
idea.
You have a 356. So let's tell the listeners about your car, the year, the color, and how you came about finding it.
Sure. So my car, to get into the 356 ownership, I own what is amongst 356 enthusiasts the least desirable model. Okay, it's a 356B in the T5 body. It's the first of like what we, if you're not a 356 guy, they all look the same, but they went through about 5 body iterations, which were slightly changed. I was very specific on this one because it was the first real modern change to 356s. It's a 1960 model. Okay, so it's first of the B series cars, and the T5 is the body shape, which is it's slightly aerodynamic. It's got it still has a single grille on the back, okay, on the engine cover to give you an idea, and has a slightly smaller rear window than what the later models do, which are called the T6 bodies. Okay, it's ruby red. It is a numbers matching car. It has its original interior and it still has its original colour. My car was actually last repainted in the late 80s, around 1987, according to the documentation I have. It's still a left-hand drive California delivered car, which I have no intention of ever changing. So I do love having as ferry intended car in a left-hand drive.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that. I don't like the conversions.
There's a lot of cars came into Australia in the early 90s that were converted that are since, because they're all due for restoration now, if that cars of that age and era, and what they were brought in for, which is essentially for making money, are due for restoration. And instead of getting restored, they tend to be getting converted back to left-hand drive anyway.
Right.
Okay, because that's the way they left the factory. But all that aside, my car is a good driver. It's not even remotely close to a concourse condition car, but it's, and look, I'm very well aware of the faults in the car as an owner, as every owner is. You only have to wash a car to know where your problems are. And and during my ownership, I've done, the mechanical upgrades necessary to keep the car so that I can turn the key on the weekend, go for a drive. Even if some weekends it might only be for 10 minutes, but others, we might go on a road trip, we might do an event with other car enthusiasts, that sort of thing, because the car still draws a lot of crowds. And, we have a lot of cars and coffee style events here in Perth. We've got good weather for it. And, I can be parked next to a modern McLaren or a Lamborghini and my car will always draw more attention than those cars,
Yeah, and while we're talking about this, for the listeners, just go and have a look. Marc actually has a YouTube channel. It's called Marcandcars, M-A-R-C and Cars. And Insta's the same, right, Marc? Marcandcars is the same for your Instagram?
It is, yes.
So go and check that out while we're just talking now if you want to have a look at it. There's a really good playlist that Marc has on his YouTube channel, which is, I think it's titled My 356. Has a few videos there about, love and hate of the 356, the things he likes, etc. So check that out while we're talking and you can get a good idea. I mean, the car, I know you don't say it's concourse condition, but it looks pretty special. It really does look like a really...
Yeah, it's a presentable, there's no doubt it's a presentable car and it always looks pretty in photographs. So like, you can hide a lot in it with a filter.
So you bought that car in Australia or you imported it from the US?
No, I bought it in Australia. I did have intent to buy it from the US, but it was bought before I had the opportunity because I was very specific about having a ruby red car. And the reason for that is, I'll be straight up, I'm not a big fan of black cars. And I like the chrome on the 50s and 60s models cars. And the chrome pops better against the darker colours than it does the silvers, which a lot of people associate with 356s because of the Porsche factory racing colour of that era. So I really like the ruby red, and I wanted a black interior because I know black interiors last longer and I was more likely to get an original interior. So, finding a ruby red matching numbers, B, 356B, T5. I wanted a coupe. I didn't want a convertible. Okay. And a Speedster was outside my budget as much as I love them.
Yeah.
But once that universe came into line and that car appeared, it was bought by another Australian guy in Brisbane. And he used the Classic Throttle Shop in Sydney to import the car. You might be familiar with the company.
Yes.
They do a lot of classic Porsche work. And he was in Brisbane. He bought the car and they were kind enough to put me in contact with him. I said, look, if you ever want to get rid of it, give me a call. And as like all timing in life, within about a day and a half after my daughter being born saying, yeah, I want to get rid of it. If you're interested, I'm going to put it on car sales in 2 days.
Always the wrong time.
Yeah,
Always the wrong time.
Yeah, I said, yeah, look, I'll be on a plane tonight. So I did the overnight flight, bought the car the next morning and flew back within 3 hours and was home that evening.
So how many years ago was this?
That was in 2012.
2012. So you've had the car for 8 years.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you said Classic Throttle Shop. So they imported it for the person in Queensland,
look, I don't know if they still do, but I know they're fairly well known for sort of getting. If you want to buy a car in the States and you find a car you like, they will charge you a premium. They'll arrange everything. They'll get it registered and do all any ADR work that may be necessary, such as new seatbelts in the car, that sort of thing, And as I had a very newborn daughter, obviously I needed seatbelts and I needed a tether to put a baby seat in, et cetera,
Yep. So the car is in Australia. It's all complianced. It's all ready to go pretty much though, right?
Yes.
Because it is actually already been driven in Queensland.
Yes.
What was it about the B that you wanted? What was the thing about the B? Because I'm never really clear, and now I think you've cleared it up for me, the single grille and the double grille at the engine. I was never really quite sure what model it changed on. So the 356B, yours has the single grille.
That's right.
But you were looking... No, go on.
For people that don't actually know 356s, the really easy identifier for the body type is the number of grills, because it's a very prominent thing to look at. The other thing is actually the size of the rear window. The rear window size changed significantly with what's called the T6 body, and that happened during the 356B around 1962, there and about. It transitioned in that year, depending on if you bought an S or a non-S model car, because they tend to sort of use all the parts on the normal as opposed to the super. And what that actually meant was, so you've got that body shape continued until the completion of the 356 range with the SC back in 1965, the last of the cars were. So, the grills are the easiest way to pick. But so the first of the T5 body, which had a very short lifespan Porsche loved keeping a body shape for 100 years, as you know, as an enthusiast. So it was only for a few years, and it was the first of the aero shape. The bumpers were lifted slightly higher. The headlights are lifted slightly higher than the 356A and the pre-A. And the other thing, some technical differences, which seem very insignificant now compared to modern cars, are things like it's got a different gearbox and a different shift mechanism. So the way the gear shifting works is a little bit different with the B compared to the A. And in all honesty, most people who do the work to restore an A will do a lot of B upgrades under the skin or C upgrades under the skin.
So it seems I've got little knowledge of the 356 market, but it seems with the 356 market, the pre-A's, the ones that were made in Mund or whatever it is, Mund in Austria, right? The 356 pre-A.
Yeah, that's the one in Gmund is actually called just the 356. The pre-A's were manufactured in Stuttgart.
Oh, they were done in Stuttgart, were they?
Yeah, the difference between a 356 it's an all aluminium body. Okay. Yes. They were manufactured in Gmund by hand. There's about 51 of them, I think. I'm going off memory here, so you're testing my Porsche knowledge a bit. Yep. Then production moved in about 1950 to Stuttgart.
Right.
And then they started to make the cars out of steel, and the bodies were manufactured by Reuter, which were literally across the road from the Porsche factory.
Okay. So that was the pre-A, was it? The first one out of...
Yeah, that's right. And the really easy way to tell the difference, if it's a steel car, it's a pre-A. If it's a aluminium car, it is a 356.
Ah, okay. And so there's the B, there's the C. So what is the most sought after in the 356 then? Which is the one the collectors want? The pre-A?
Look, the pre-A
apart from the Speedster, of course.
Yeah. Look, when it comes to collectors, if you're a 356 guy, you will be very fussy about exactly what you want. If you're a Porsche enthusiast, you're very likely to buy a C because that's the end of the evolution of the product, and it's the pinnacle of development of that car. It's like buying the latest 911. If you want the best 911, regardless of your opinion, the 992 is probably the best evolution of that car. Okay.
Right.
Now, the 356C or SC is the case with the last of the cars is the most sought after on that front. Yeah, it comes with disc brakes and, higher power, all the little things, but, A's are by far and away the most common cars for aspirational 356 owners because they've still got that lower front bumper. They're a little more bathtub would be a good way for me to describe them. Okay. Yep. The Pre-A has the V-shaped front window where it's just like a bent flat window, looks a bit like fighter jet, and they tend to be they're very valuable cars just because there's just not many of them left.
Yeah. So your car, I mean, common thing with early Porsches, 356s, 912s, 911 is the rust issue. So because your car came from the States, it was obviously restored at some time. It looks like it has had some kind of restoration done in the US.
Look, it's had a I would suggest it's had a cosmetic cleanup for sale at some point in all reality. Like, I know that there's rust in my car. I know where the rust points are very prone. I've had a little bit of rust repaired in my car since I've had it.
Okay.
At the bottom half of the doors, very commonplace, and the bottom of the front guards because there's nowhere for the water to go other than to sit there and rust away at your metal. But that's no different to an early 911 either. So as a result, the car itself, with the restoration part of it, I'll probably crack that nut open in about 10 years because the car's still quite presentable. It still drives nice. It's not like it bends in half going around corners or you got to put your feet on the dash to open the doors or anything because my longitudinals are rusted through. But I'm conscious that I will at some point do a full body restoration on that car.
Okay. So the 356, it comes from the factory, and I know it. During this time, Porsche didn't offer many options. What sort of options were on your list from your car from the factory? It was a 1960 model. What did it come with? And your car is, I just want to make the listeners know, your car is a matching numbers car, which is quite important, yes. Right? Matching transmission, matching engine.
All panels are original still, yes. Because in those early cars, every panel's stamped with the last couple of digits of the chassis number.
Yes.
The options on my car, I'm going to go off memory because I haven't got the documentation in front of me. I do have the documentation, it's just not with me right now. Off memory, it came with Continental tyres. Okay, it came with a driver's side mirror on the door.
Yes, very cool.
Yes, it came with seat belts.
And seat belts, and that's it.
They're the three options that my car came with. There were other options. That's what mine came with.
Yeah. If you go to Marc's YouTube channel, like I said, that playlist where he's got my 356, he actually goes through the options and shows you the car. I thought what was really nice about your car, and when you opened up the frunk, it looks very clean. You know what I mean? And you got that original toolkit, which is quite special.
That's actually That's actually a reissue. That toolkit.
Oh, is it?
It is, yes. Okay. It's not the original toolkit that came with the car. It didn't come with a toolkit. I've still got the original jack. I don't have the original toolkit.
Oh, okay. Because you can search out those original toolkits on Bring a Trailer. They sometimes come up with for a crazy money, right? I see them come up every now and again.
There's a guy, like if you're a 356 nutcase like I am, and a member of the registry, which is actually the largest sports car club in the world, the 356 registry, in the US, there's actually a guy in Germany who advertises regularly that he will do the due diligence and make sure you get the right year, tool roll, and he'll find all the matching parts and stuff in it for you for a certain fee.
Wow, fantastic. Yeah. So when you bought the car, I want to go back to when you picked up the car.
Sure.
You drove the car back? Or you had it transported?
No, I had it trucked.
You had it trucked back. So when it gets trucked back to your house where you live at the time. First drive. How did it feel? What did you think about when you first got into it? I mean, did you drive it? Test drove it in Queensland? Yeah, I did test drive it when in Brisbane. That's correct. Yeah, I did.
And look, I had known expectations. I'll come back to it in this conversation if we have time, but have quite a long history with classic sports cars in a previous job. But I have very conscious experience with 356s. Like in my life, I've probably driven 50 of them. So I know a good one and a bad one or a mediocre one. And when I drove it in Queensland, it was middle of the bell curve for a 356B.
Okay.
Okay, so that was adequate for me,
Yeah, so you've driven a lot. So you go to Queensland. So you do the inspection on the car yourself. You check it over, and you know pretty much straight away that you know what you're up for and how good or how bad it is. Like you said, it's in the middle.
Generally, I would say I was aware of 95% of the problems that the car had.
All right. So what have you done? So the car, I mean, the 356B is it 60 horsepower? I'm going off memory here.
Yes,
I can't remember. It's 60 horsepower, right?
Correct. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So they had 60. They had 90 horsepower, correct, with the SC, was it?
Yes. 90s. Yeah, I think it was like 95. It ended up at the end of the development. So in the B, you get the normal, the super, and then the super 90. And the super 90 had 90 horsepower in the Bs.
Okay. So I listening to other podcasts that we do, listening to Spike's Car Radio and reading things online. Will Hoyt Restoration in LA, who deals specifically with 356s. Then you got Rod Emery, you got the Guru, and then you got Rod Emery, who does the outlaw versions of it, which cost you a fortune. I think one just sold on Bring a Trailer for $500,000, $500,000 US. An early model that he did. So your car's got 60 horsepower. When you bought it had 60 horsepower. It hadn't been tweaked. It hadn't been fixed up in any way?
It was dead stock, and the motor. I'll tell you now. I've since overhauled the engine. I've done a full engine overhaul on the car. But when we cracked it open, it was the first time it's been cracked open.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so the car, I did dyno it before I did the engine overhaul. It had 37 horsepower at the back wheel.
37 horsepower. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
From 60 new down to 37, which is probably about right after that age.
Yeah, it's 50 years old, and I've got to be honest with you, it's pretty close to my age, and I reckon I've only got about half of what I had when I started.
So even that car though, if it's on the dyno at 37, Mark, even if you get it up to 60, it's quite a noticeable difference with the lightweight nature of the car, right?
It's
a very light car. Yeah, so that would be noticeable.
Yeah, it's 860 kilos.
Yeah, so that's very, very light. I don't know what the conversion is in pounds. I think you just double it to pounds, right? So you've only got 37. It comes with 60. So what do you plan to do? You think, okay, how much power do I want in this car? What's the maximum I can put into this car without destroying the essence of it?
Sure. So look, there's a couple of factors to take in consideration, okay? Porsche engines are expensive to get power out of. Volkswagen engines, which bolt straight into your transmission, are very cheap to get large amounts of horsepower out of. But like you said, the essence of the car, and of which I'm very conscious of. Like I wanted to maintain my original engine, and I didn't want to take it beyond the point of I'm going to one day put a rod through the side of my block and then I no longer have my matching numbers engine. Okay.
Yeah, true. Yep.
I guess if there are enthusiasts out there that are listening, the driving dynamic and feel of a flat 4 motor, even a flat 6 motor, you know that this motor has evolved from what was originally, the Volkswagen flat 4 motor that was, invented by the Porsche family. It's a refined version, but it is still essentially that same feel where the torque under your power curve is really what gives you your driving experience and dynamic. So the torque of that small motor, whilst only punching out 37 horsepower, was still a fun car to drive. But the limitations are certainly within the car were the brakes. It's got 4-wheel drum brakes, which when adjusted well, do work quite well. So I was very conscious of addressing everything else before I got to the engine. So I replaced all my shock absorbers, made sure all my torsion bar bushings were replaced and lubricated, and all my king pins and link pins in the steering were done. And I actually put a front disc brake conversion kit on my car.
Oh, okay. So is that good advice to people who are thinking, they're listening to this and they're going, I want a classic 911 or a classic 356, a classic Porsche for my first Porsche.
Sure. When
you eventually find one, and I want to get into that, but when you find one, is that the first thing that you look at? You look at the tires, you look at the suspension, you look at the brakes, and then you would say go to the engine before you think about tweaking the engine to either give it more power or maybe just to make it more reliable. I think it's a balance, isn't it, between power and reliability?
It definitely is, yeah. And look, I did. Regardless if you're buying a new Porsche Classic, or even if you're going to go out and buy yourself a new 991.2 GT3, if you're going to punch another 60 horsepower in it, you want to have a good look at your suspension. You know what I mean? Like you just otherwise you're lining yourself up for a disaster. And even if it's not even a Porsche, if you're going to go out and buy any car, if you're going to pump your power before you pump your handling of the car, it's an unnecessary risk for what will be a large capital investment.
So you bump the power of the car. You have the Porsche guys in Perth, as I call them, the specialists. The ones you want to go to, you find out there's someone in Perth nearby, and you take it to them after how many years to get the engine tweaked?
6. So I got it done about nearly 2 years ago now.
2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And that's quite a cost, isn't it, to get this power? Like you said, it's not cheap to get power out of a Porsche engine.
Yeah,
extra power.
Yes, like to give you a really basic example, one of the changes I made in the engine were the conrods, which have a very low limitation on the factory conrods, but adequate for the 60 horsepower that the car came with. But with what I had in mind, it meant that I needed non-Porsche conrods. So I went to Carrera, which is a very renowned company who make high-performance conrods for all sorts of cars, including a lot of Porsche models. But to give you some insight, the Carrera conrods for a 356 are around $1,200 US. Okay. If I buy Carrera conrods for a Type 4 Volkswagen engine, they cost me about $320 US.
Okay, so you get the Volkswagen part. Yeah.
Okay, so now the Volkswagen ones don't fit in a 356. There's very few parts that you can interchange between a Volkswagen engine and a 356 engine.
Oh, okay.
So you do have to buy the $1,200 Carrera rods to go in your 356. So the yes, like there's very few parts that are interchangeable, sadly. Yeah, otherwise the cars, there'd be a lot more of them on the road, now today, because they would have been cheaper to repair when they were worth nothing,
So what is the power now? What have you upped the power to after that
117.
117, so that's fast. From hearing other people talk about 3.5. Sorry, go on.
It's 912 fast. A well-developed 912 punches out around 100 to 110 horsepower on the wheels, to give you some perspective. Okay, the early 911s put out, 130? I'm going off memory here. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think the 69 912s have the most power, I think, from memory. I think they're the ones that have the most power, the long wheelbase one.
Yep, so, so if you early 911, it's early 911 power, and it's a lighter car. Okay,
and it's a lighter car. So you've got the speed now. Everyone says that the 356 is really well engineered, as in for handling, that it has got for the time that it was built, it actually handles very, very well. Did it impact the handling from going from this 37 horsepower at the dyno to now what you're using, the power you're using?
It didn't, because I did all the hard work prior to the motor getting done. Like the car was underpowered for the chassis once I got to the point of doing the motor. Okay.
And what else what are the other modifications you've done to the car? Because I noticed the wheels look slightly different. They look like a bigger or a deeper dish or something.
Yeah, they're big wheels, right? I have 3 sets of wheels, which I change depending on my mood on any given day, I guess would be the best way to describe it. It's a pretty easy task to do. Like a early 911, you only have to jack it up one point, lift both sides of the car up to change the wheels. So the wheels that you'd probably seen most commonly on my Instagram and in my YouTube channel are a set of 17-inch smoothies. They're 17 by 8, so they're big wheels for a 356. In all honesty, they're over-rubbered and they're heavy, so my unsprung weight is less than ideal. But they're wheels I'll use for boulevard cruising would be the best way to describe. If I want to do spirited driving, I'll put the original 15-inch wheels on that are only 4.5, 15-inch diameter and 4.5 wide, and they're only got 165 width on them, whereas the big 8-inch wheels have got 195 width on them.
So they fit okay, the bigger wheel, do they? They actually fit without any modification?
Those wheels were custom made to fit in my car.
Oh, they're custom made,
yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. Because I'm a big fan of the steel wheels just with the bolt showing.
Sure.
I don't know whether that's because it's a trend, but it always looks really good on the 912s.
Mildly outlawry. Can't remember where the hubcaps went. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, 912s, 356, like you lost the hubcap on the highway or something.
Yep, I get it. And like the 904s, 906s of that era, they all look like that too, which is a nice look in my opinion too.
Yeah, for the 912, I think they always look good when it's got the steel wheels. All right, so any other modifications? That's pretty much it since you've owned the car?
Yeah, look, and just some really fundamental basic stuff like since my daughter got out of her little seat in the back.
Yes.
The back is a little seat anyway, right? I've put a 4-point harness in there for her because it only had a lap belt in the back, which was the legal requirement. So so she's got an over-the-shoulder type thing. So she's as safe in there as what a 356 will be if there's ever the worst should happen. You got to remember the A pillars of a 356 are about the size of 2 fingers width, right? So they're not exactly the car you want to be in if something doesn't go well. And the end and the fuel tank is literally over your thighs because it's behind the front dash. So overall, but that aside, the cars. What else have I done to the car? I've had the gearbox rebuilt as well.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a
4-speed, right? 4-speed,
is,
the 356.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
I love
what else?
saying this. Ready? Same as a 930.
Same as a 930, yeah. So is there anything else? Is there anything else on the list? I mean, everyone has a list of things they want to do to their car. Is there something else on the list that you're thinking, I want to do some more, or I'm going to leave it for now?
I think, look, once the body gets done, I'll be very stringent about making my car very close to original from the skin down, if you get my drift. So, I've got a set of Speedster seats that I've had reupholstered that are sitting in the garage that I haven't fitted to the car yet, okay? In all honesty, it's because the coupe seats are so nice and comfortable and you don't need a lot more support than what my car's got the power to give you anyway, in reality, So the Speedster seats will be an aesthetic and, I'm getting the age where myself and my wife aren't as thin in the hips as we used to be, so the Speedster seats are pretty snug at the best of times.
Yeah. They're a nice looking seat, but I was thinking that
amazing,
every time I see them, they really are a slim seat, aren't they? They're very, they're very small, but they're a beautiful shape. They really are a beautiful shape.
And look, to sit in, and I've been fortunate enough to have the comparable experience. The carbon buckets that you can option in your GT3 or your GT4, they're about the same width as that to sit in.
Oh, are they?
Yeah, they are. Mm-hmm. To give you a perspective, if you've ever had that opportunity. So, they fit some people better than others, and the curve of the back is actually a little more comfortable than those carbon buckets.
Okay. So for the listeners, just say, people who listen to the podcast, some people haven't got a Porsche yet. Some people have just bought their first Porsche. Normally it's it seems to be a trend with the 996, and I guess that's just due to the price at the moment. People are buying 996s, and a lot of people that want to be on the owner stories actually have 996s. Like, sure. I had 3 people contact me this week, all of them with 996s. For the people out there who are looking for a 356 as their first Porsche, would you recommend it if they had the funds? Yeah,
sure. Yeah, the caveat I would put on there is find someone who knows about them before you go and spend your money on one.
Because, so do your research, get on the forums and really
you need someone who can put hands on and say, I know what's wrong with 356s. Here's what I would look at. And it just comes with experience. You can look at, not to bag the forums, but the forums are typically contributed by some very certain personality types, as you know from reading them. And, the level of expertise, like the real experts of 356s globally, there's probably about 10 who are the go-to guys. None of them ever contribute to forums. So I always keep that in mind. So just find someone who's got one, who's owned owned one or owned many, or I'm one of the few 356 guys I know who only own one. A lot of people tend to collect them because, they're very, the car's got a lot of character, it's got a lot of personality, it appeals to both men and women. So there's a lot of female owners of 356s as well, which is, less common with the 911 cars. I would find someone who has owned one and preferably owned one for some time and has come across the problems that occur to them.
You seem to be someone who plays it quite safe when you buy a car, because when you bought the 914, you went to the States and you picked it up, right? And that's probably due to the time. And like you said, there's not online, you can't search it.
Sure.
when you buy the 356, you go up to Queensland, you pick up the car, you check it out, all right, with your experience, which I want to get into a bit too. So now, today, because in the last 12 months with COVID, etc., people are more comfortable in buying online. They're more comfortable buying from Bring a Trailer or P-Car Market, etc. Would you buy a car completely sight unseen? Would you do that?
If you're using the terms...
If you're buying you're buying a next Porsche, would you do it?
I probably would do it. I would probably require a PPI for my own peace of mind.
Okay.
And it wouldn't be from a Porsche Centre, my PPI.
Yes.
And I've got nothing against Porsche Centres, don't get me wrong. However, and my PPI wouldn't be to negotiate my price. It'd be more to be aware of what is ahead of me.
What your cost will be.
Yeah, that's right. I know. I'm very we all know if something's too good to be true, it usually is. Okay.
Yes, true.
So, whenever there's a real bargain to be had, you get your you go get a PPI and you'll find out why it's a bargain. There's no crystal. If it's a lotto win, it's a lotto win. Don't get me wrong. If you're that lucky to fall into one. However, I'm sure they're very rare and far apart. But with regards to getting that inspection, it's more a case for me to find out, is the job that needs doing the stuff I can manage, A, myself, B, through my existing network, or C, through someone I don't even know, so I'm paying market cost.
Okay, good point.
So for me, that's for me when I think of cars sight unseen, so to speak. Like I'm a daily 911 hunter. Okay, so I will look at, in Australia, Gumtree.
Yes.
I look in the Middle East on Dubizzle every day. I look in I look at car sales in Australia, and I use Auto Tempest. And all of those platforms, if I'm not looking at it every day, to be every 2 days, just to see what falls into the market, to get a feel for what's going on, et cetera, and and taking that into consideration. And look, right now in my life, I'm not going to buy a 911 because I'm not in that position, but I will buy one at some point in the future, and I will very unlikely go and look at it in person unless it's in WA in the future.
Okay. So if you bought another... Is the 356 a keeper though? That's not something you're going to get rid of, right?
I'll let my daughter deal with it.
Yeah. I think that's good advice with the PPI though, and I think when you come back to you're saying don't get it done through Porsche dealers. I think the main thing with the PPI, and I don't want to say this in a bad way because I know someone had this done who I've spoken to before. If you're getting a PPI, I wouldn't get the PPI done by the people that are selling the car. If the owner gets his car serviced through a certain dealer or specialist, I would probably pick a different dealer or specialist to do that PPI. Now,
sure.
And I know Steve thinks the same way, Steve that does a podcast with me, but that's just me personally because I don't know, I just want to be safe in every way. And I think sometimes you have to be careful with PPIs as well.
Sure, I'll just give you my 2 cents on that opinion. If I'm requiring a PPI from a region I don't have a contact in, that I don't have a relationship with, someone that can do it for me, and the person who did the servicing on the car isn't a Porsche Centre, I wouldn't put that same value on what you've just said. Because if I don't have a relationship, I don't have that one-on-one conversation with the guy or girl who's doing the PPI because I know they've done PPIs in the past, whatever. I'm trusting their reputation as a business. I would put my trust in, if they've serviced a car, to do the PPI because they have tripped across the problems, in my opinion.
Okay. So they've got a long history.
Yeah, sure. And no one knows a car better than someone that's worked on it multiple times.
Yeah.
And look, I'm a business owner myself, and I would never compromise the reputation of my business for one customer.
Right.
That's not good business,
Yep. Okay. So I just want to go back quickly to the picking up the car in Queensland, the 356.
Yeah, sure.
You said you've driven a lot of 356s, so you actually had the experience. So you worked in classic cars before, so that's what gave you the advantage, or you serviced cars before, or? Yeah,
look, I used to work for VDO Instruments, who make all the gauges and dashes in most German cars and a lot of other cars around Australia and the USA. And during my time of employment there, which was about 6 years or so, we did a lot of, when I say we, the team that, I was a workshop manager there, we did a lot of left to right hand drive conversions of cars back in the early 90s in WA. A lot came in, we would have converted maybe 25 356s back in the early 90s.
Right.
Okay. But all sorts of cars. I'm talking Maseratis, Ferraris, Jaguars, anything and everything that came in. So I got to work on a very broad range of cars. So I got to experience a lot of cars. Not so much mechanically, more electrically was where my experience lay. However, the workshop that I worked for, working for VDO, we also worked on lots of other aspects of vehicles. We had, welders that worked there. We had mechanics that worked there, because quite often you get cars in that just needed to be going so that you could do the job you needed doing. And as a result, I got exposed to a lot of cars. And, it was a fantastic experience to look back on. I didn't really appreciate it that much at the time, but, I got to experience and drive lots of 356s, 911s, 308s, 328 Ferraris. Oh, you name it, I had a go. I pretty much got to play with, Mm-hmm.
So that helped. One thing we haven't touched on, reliability of the 356. Obviously you've had the engine, tweaked and
Sure.
It's probably perfect, but reliability, you think the reliability, the running costs, etc., are similar to a same vintage 911, to a 65, 70 911, or you think it's more expensive to upkeep the 356?
No, I believe the 911 would be slightly more expensive, and it's because the disposable, consumable products that are associated with those two motors are, there's just more of them on a 911.
Okay.
The problems that exist with those early cars are these things called carburetors. Okay.
I've read about that. Yeah.
So look, old cars and hot weather, Perth, okay,
yes.
and to a degree Queensland and Sydney as well, okay, and definitely in Adelaide, we have the problems where the fuel just dries up. You park the car for 5 minutes after it's been hot, come back, start again, there's no fuel in the carburetor, so you've got to go through that drama of getting the fuel into the things. And anyway, it's technique, it's understanding cars, but it's no different to how everybody drove cars in this era. Okay,
yes.
Up until realistically the early 1980s, there were plenty of carbureted cars on the road still.
Yeah, true.
In fact, look, I'm sure a listener will correct me, but I even think the early Hyundai XLs had carburetors. Okay, so we're talking early 1990s there. Okay, in the scheme of things, it's by no means a death sentence. Now, the boxer motors are notorious for the early carbureted cars for fouling plugs. Now, if anyone's not unaware of what that means, it means, there's too much oil that gets through into the combustion chamber, and the plug doesn't spark when it's required to. So your 911 runs on 5, or your 356 runs on 3 till there's enough mumbo in there to clean it out, and then off it goes again. Okay. Then there's techniques and tactics of owning these cars, and regular long-term owners know that, I only buy this brand of plug because right now with the fuel I use and the carburetor setup and the ignition setup I have is the least likely to foul those plugs. So this is a little bit of trial and error that you work with your mechanic, so to speak, to have these problems solved. But overall, reliability, I trickle charge my car because I've got a 6-volt car, right?
Yeah.
So, I would never not park my car without the trickle charger on it, because if I leave it for 2 weeks and not start it, I've got to bump start it. It's a pain in the bottom.
No, the trickle charge is the way to go. Mm-hmm. So with the carburetors, I notice when when I'm looking at 912, some people have got the original carbs and some people have changed it to Weber. And I notice I think 356s are similar, right? So is that a common thing that people do? They change it to the Webers, or I know some people like to keep them original, and I know there's some place in the States, which I can't think of the name now, that people take their carburetors to, and there's very few places that know how to get them working effectively.
Oh, look, this is like the argument between BMW and Mercedes, for the owners. Now,
right.
There's a school of thought that Porsche make everything perfect. Why would you ever change it?
Yep.
Okay. Now, 912s in particular, which essentially has another mild evolution on what the 356 SCs were, they came with Solex carburetors, okay?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Solex carburetors are notorious for wearing out their main shafts, which means that they're no longer stable on either side, so you don't get consistent idle and acceleration, et cetera, okay? And Weber actually have bearings on those shafts, so there is a benefit of having Webers, but Webers also have their shortcomings as well,
Right.
But look, in my advice to anyone who's thinking about changing carbs is the problem is very rarely your carbs if you've got a problem. Okay, it's usually your ignition, and everyone blames the carbs because they're the soft target. Even inexperienced 356 mechanics who, if you are going to buy a 912, you're going to have to find an experienced 356 mechanic to look after it. And if you are back in Sydney when this occurs, the guys at Auto House are very experienced with 356s.
Okay.
Getting someone and whatever they're comfortable with working with the most, that would be my advice on what path to go down.
Okay. So you have someone that's really good in Perth, though, that works on your car? Yeah. You have good 356 specialists or not so many?
Yeah, there's a couple of them, actually. There's three really good 356 mechanics. The guy who overhauled my motor had overhauled 4 in the 12 months prior to that. Okay. So my regular mechanic who I go and see, he actually was the workshop manager at Auto House for a number of years and was involved in the restoration of over 20 356s. So he's very familiar with them. For the discussion's sake, I have Webers on my car, okay? Yep. And but I do know one of the main motivations for that is because my regular mechanic is very comfortable with Webers and that's what he knows. So if he knows it, he is more likely to have a successful outcome with tuning the car and managing it.
So just for the listeners, Marc is in Perth in Western Australia. It seems like there's a really good Porsche community around where you are. I mean, based on your YouTube channel, like I said, go and check out Marc's YouTube channel. It's called Marc&Cars. Give him a subscribe, give him a like, and Marc&Cars on his Instagram. But there's quite a lot of passion there in Perth. So is there a strong 356 community? Is there a lot of 356 owners in Perth?
Look, I don't know how many there are nationally, right? But we've got about 15 to 18 in the metro area that are regularly driven. Okay. But to give viewers a perspective, the whole of West Australia has a population of about 2.2 million, of which about 2.1 million live in Perth. Okay.
Yeah.
In reality, it's a fairly affluent state. Okay. So there are a lot of Porsches in general in Perth. When you travel over east and you come back, you think, oh, geez, there's a lot of Cayennes or there's a lot of Macans or there's a lot of whatever it is. You do see a lot of Porsches here, especially if you're a Porsche enthusiast, you look out for Porsches,
Yes.
And so there are a lot of Porsches here, and there's probably 3 or 4 fairly prolific collectors of Porsches. Okay, so as you know yourself, very few Porsche enthusiasts are happy with one.
Yeah.
Okay, so
you get the bug, don't you? You want another one, that's for sure.
Yep.
But you've got a great car, Marc. You really do. I mean, it's a great Porsche. I mean, I don't know how many people are wanting to get a 356 as their first car, but like I said, they should go and look at your channel and look at the videos you've done.
I think I'm the youngest 356 owner I know.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Normally 356 owners are probably nearing, 6? I shouldn't say this. People are going to get upset with me. They're in their 60s, I think. It's mid-60s, right?
Well, you just have to look at what cars were aspirational when people hit their license. And that's as a guide, gives you an idea on what cars an owner of the cars that are now expensive, doesn't it?
It's interesting.
Early 911 owners are similar,
Yeah, it's interesting that I was listening to, and I don't know whether you listened to it, I might have been on Matt Farah's podcast, and someone said that the cars from the 50s and 60s are like diving a little bit. You know what I mean? Because all the people that wanted to relive that are getting old. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And now it's the 80s and 90s of the cars that, I think it was Matt Farah actually, 80s and 90s cars are what people are searching for because it's that age group when you can actually go back to your childhood or whatever. Yep. You can afford it, you've got the money, and you want one of those cars. So it appears to be that it is definitely a trend.
And we all reach a certain part of our life where we've achieved a level of income or affluence that we can then buy what we want, for example, right? And that's and we tend to buy to what we can afford. So that means that if the 356 was your poster car when you were 18. As a general rule, that means you were born in the, what's that? Yeah. Early 50s or late 40s.
Yeah, exactly.
Which means today, right, you are now 70, so.
Yeah. So you're either reliving your youth, or you've got so much money and you go out and buy a speedster that it's not about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
so
right.
that's pretty much it, isn't it?
It
it's
is,
either
yes.
money or memories. Money or memories seems to be how it always goes.
But usually, if you got the money, you try and claim the best memories you can, I think.
Yeah, true. I always like to ask this question, and we're getting towards end of the podcast because we always try to keep these around an hour. We've gone a little bit longer, but that's fine.
Sure.
I will ask you if there's anything else you want to talk about. Before that, if someone's coming to Perth,
yes,
and they want to go on a great driving road, or even Australia, something you've experienced in your 356,
yep.
Where would you say for them to go for a drive?
Look, if they're going to stay in the Perth metro area, there's lots of lovely driving roads in the Perth Hills, which is 40-minute drive out of the city. And, there's quite a famous road called O'Brien Road, which is sadly the road that Peter Brock had his fatal accident on, but it is an amazing road to drive nonetheless. Okay, if they've got the time, there are plenty of fantastic driving roads in the southwest of Western Australia. I've just last night finished editing a video. We went down there in the 356 for a weekend away down to Bridgetown, and there's some amazing driving roads around there too. We went down to catch up with another 356 owner that inherited his car from his dad, who bought the car back in 1963. So,
really? Wow.
Yeah, it's a great story. And so we went down there for that weekend, and there's some amazing driving roads down there. So it depends on how long if you come to Western Australia, it is the world's most remote capital city. So everywhere's a long way away. You know what I mean? So you've got to be prepared for it when you come down here.
Good advice. Okay, Marc, so before we leave, anything else you want to tell the listeners?
I don't think so. I think, if anyone is coming to Western Australia and you're a Porsche enthusiast and you want to have a beer or a coffee or go for a drive in a 356, don't hesitate and just touch and base with me. You can contact me through my Instagram or through my YouTube channel. I'm a relatively, normal human, so there's no surprises there. Okay, so...
All right, so I'll put the link to Marc's YouTube channel in the description of this podcast. So it's marcandcars, like I said, MARC, and the Instagram's the same. So go over to both those channels and give him a follow and check out his videos. And like I said, I reckon if you go to the YouTube channel, go to the one where it's My 356, or that playlist that you have with about 5 or 6 videos. I think that's a good place to start. And then Marc's got videos about events that he's going to. He's interviewed other people with other 911s and 356s, like you said, the guy that inherited the 356. So there's some really good videos there. So let's go and support Marc. We all like to support other people in the Porsche community, and he really is sharing his passion with you guys. So well done, Marc. Great story. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So I think we'll leave it there. And this is PorscheCooled Owner Stories. Like I said, this is number 12. Thanks again, everyone, for the support. It's been absolutely fantastic over the last 3 weeks. And I know you guys, I've been getting multitude of messages. I will respond to everyone. But the Owner Stories is really resonating. I'll use that word that Steve uses, resonating with you guys. So we'll keep them up, and we'll keep them up through December and January. Anyway, thanks for listening to the PorscheCooled Podcast. Bye for now.